In college football, not every week is a monster game, right? Some weeks are. If you're in the SEC, you're playing for championships. A lot of weeks are. Some weeks are not. And LSU plays Louisiana Tech this week. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on a deep dive on Sonny Cumbie's squad. We'll talk a little bit about it as the week moves on. But sometimes in these weeks, people get to talking. And when they get to talking, we get to listening, creates some stir on the internet, and that becomes the topic of conversation. And that's what it's going to be today. Dabo Swinney took to the microphone in review of Clemson's loss, leading up to not the most important game on their schedule here. And he had this to say about LSU and Clemson back on Saturday. And then after we hear from Dabo Swinney, we'll hear Brian Kelly's retort to it. And that's what's going to ruffle the most feathers on the internet. But this is what Dabo Swinney had to say about Saturday night's contest.
I mean, if we didn't make the first tackle, Wade's got the guy. He's got, I don't even know how his knee didn't go down. But he, without that run, like I said, the last 58 minutes is 2.8. And that is a physical group. It's a very smart quarterback, and that is a back. So they're going to be a problem. And they got some explosive dudes, and it was a hell of a game. It was a hell of a game. Down to the last play. Right out of the gate. It's like getting the final exam day one of class. They made a 65, we made a 58. Neither one of us were great. If we didn't make...
So that's what Dabo has to say. And look, I don't completely disagree with the entire premise of it. I did feel like it was a pretty competitive game between two good teams. I think Clemson's good. I think LSU's good. I think LSU was much the better team. And I think that was reflected on the scoreboard. I said this yesterday. I think if they go back and play that game again tomorrow, that LSU wins the game. And it is, in a way, like kind of getting a final exam on the first day of class. Like, you don't have time to ramp up to this deal. It's go. And I can make the case that was the toughest game on Clemson's schedule, and I can make the case that's the toughest game on LSU's schedule. So in that way, he's right. As far as giving failing grades to both teams, that's a subjective thing. And he knows a lot more about what went on that field on Saturday night than I do. He's watched the tape a lot of times. I have not. And he's got a better football mind than I do. So I can't tell you that he's wrong, but I would quibble with the grading. I think LSU's grade was a little bit better than a 64, 68, or whatever he gave LSU. I think that you look at the way that LSU's defense played against an offensive line that's that veteran, against wide receivers that explosive, against a quarterback that's that talented with that much experience in that stadium, and you shut them out in the second half, I would suggest that's a pretty strong effort by LSU's defense that I wouldn't necessarily categorize as a failing grade. Was LSU's offense great? No. But you had a quarterback, as he mentioned, that was in control, got LSU into the right plays, didn't put the ball in harm's way, converted some third downs, made the play to Trey Green. I thought LSU did pretty well on offense as well against a really good Clemson defense. So is there probably an element of sour grapes to Dabo giving both teams a failing grade for Saturday night? Yeah, I think that's fair to say. You watch his demeanor on the sideline. You watch the aw shucks nature that he generally has when he's up there on the podium. And I think there's some sour grapes involved in that. But again, I think the premise of what he was saying before he got to the grades thing was probably pretty fair. And then Brian Kelly was told about said grades that were issued by Dabo Swinney. And this is what he had to say today in front of the microphone. And this is probably going to get the internet into a tizzy.
We dominated him in the second half. So he's either a really good grader for, giving himself a 58, or he's a really hard grader on us, or he didn't see the second half, which that might be the case. He might not have wanted to see the second half. So, again, look, this is all past. We dominated.
Look, we dominated him in the second half. Maybe he didn't want to see the second half. That's what the internet's going to run with, right? But I kind of agree with Brian Kelly's point as well, as I laid out there. I think LSU deserves a little bit better grade than that. And he's going ifs and buts with, well, if we make the tackle, then, it's 58 minutes and all that kind of stuff he's talking about. It's a 10-10 game. Well, I could say the same thing if LSU doesn't fumble the football and Clemson run it down for a field goal, or if, LSU with 3 guys stops Randall at the goal line on that 4th down where they tackled it, they had him at the 2,
or if
Clemson
they
doesn't score any points.
Or if they catches a touchdown, which it should have been.
Well, Barry Browns catches the touchdown. So there's lots of ifs and buts you can tap dance around over the course of that game. But I think, to my point from yesterday, and then to reiterate it here, LSU's a better team on Saturday. So whether or not Dabo wants to give LSU 64 or 94, that doesn't really matter. And the fact of the matter is that LSU did win the game. I will be completely candid with you and not fly off the handle and do sports talk radio guy goes nuts thing. This stuff doesn't really interest me that much. I don't care what the two coaches quibble back and forth with on the microphones with the game in the rearview mirror. You can talk about LSU's mindset and all the things that they did leading up to the game with the 1-0 stuff and say it's a really good thing or it's a really bad thing. Doesn't matter. Just go play. You can talk about what the coaches have to say after the game. Doesn't really matter. The result's decided. The internet is going to go nuts with this. The internet is probably going to take, my assumption is going to take Brian Kelly's side on this because his team won the game. That's the most important thing. You're going to see quibbling from the Clemson side of things. I saw Facts and Childress, who we had on this show. I went on his show twice leading up to the game, saying that, Dabo Swinney's a much more accomplished coach and that Brian Kelly thinks he runs college football with this. I don't see it as some sort of a big deal. It's easier to talk a little bit with the W in your back pocket, and Brian Kelly's got that. But again, this is something that I don't think would get much traction if LSU was playing Alabama this week or if LSU was playing Texas A&M this week. Instead, LSU's playing Louisiana Tech. So here we are referencing it because I feel like it would be a derelict of duty not to mention these two coaches and Brian Kelly suggesting that Dabo Swinney missed with his grades, because that's something I think you, the LSU fan, are going to be interested in. We'll have a story up on LouisianaSports.net, and you can listen to it here. Again, my entirety of the take on this is it sounds like sour grapes from Dabo. It was probably a shot that Brian Kelly didn't need to fire, and ultimately it's not going to matter. Will this be brought back up next August? Yes. If LSU and Clemson play in the college football playoff, is ESPN going to play that clip? Yes. Is it going to generate a ton of impressions on Twitter in the next 3 hours? Yes. Does it matter at all to me? No. I would personally suggest that LSU played a really good football team. I think they proved themselves to be a contender nationally with that game. It doesn't mean that you're in the college football playoff. You got a lot of work to do on a really tough schedule to get there. But it was a far better than a failing grade for LSU on Saturday night. In fact, I think it was a passing grade. And for the defense, I would suggest it was well into the A range over the course of the game. That's without watching the tape 40 times. That's without checking out the All-22 cut up. That's just watching the game, looking at the stat sheet, and talking about it here. I think LSU did a pretty good job. Dabo, sour grapes a little bit. Yeah. Brian Kelly probably didn't need to do that. Yeah. I'm going to leave that in the rearview mirror at this point. The housekeeping that came out of today as far as Brian Kelly's press conference went, Destin Hill, wide receiver, Florida State transfer, only played 2 snaps in the game on Saturday. He broke his left hand. That, to me, you say wide receiver, broken hand, I'm thinking that's 6-8 weeks because, well, you kind of need your hands to catch the ball and to block, the two things that wide receivers do. I'm wrong. Brian Kelly said today that they had a procedure yesterday on the left hand. They put a plate in it that stabilized the hand. He will miss this week for Louisiana Tech, but should be able to go out there in a limited capacity next week. So sounds like, by the time LSU plays Southeastern, I wouldn't suggest Destin Hill is going to be a big factor in the game against Florida next week. 1, he was a second-team, third-team player. 2, he's coming off a broken hand. You've got a lot of wide receivers that need their opportunity to play, so I doubt he's a big factor in the game against Florida. But the next week against Southeastern, you would imagine Destin Hill very much could factor into that game as it gets well out of hand, probably in the second quarter. So Bad news that Destindel's got a broken hand. Good news that it appears he can return pretty quickly based on the procedure that he had. So that was really the only significant injury issue that LSU had. You certainly had Davian Ramos cramp up, which when he missed that field goal, cramped up. It was an ugly-looking kick. He should be fine. Came back and kicked the extra point on the touchdown there. So no significant injury issues to this point for LSU as they get ready for Louisiana Tech coming up on Saturday. So, hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.